Minori formally filed for divorce from Yudai. Yudai, fully aware that Minori was an indispensable financial supporter, frantically explained that everything was arranged by his mother. Minori ignored him, saying she would take their son away the next day and urging Yudai to sign the divorce agreement as soon as possible. Taking revenge on Yudai alone wasn't enough. The next day, Minori came to Riko's house. Riko asked Minori if she had come to mock her because Wataru had run away. Minori replied, it wasn't Wataru's fault she ran away. Unexpectedly, Riko slapped Minori and told her not to call Wataru by her name. Riko remarked that Wataru had changed since Minori appeared. Inciting a middle school student is a crime. Minori looked up and said, is cheating not a crime? Riko has finally tasted the pain of losing the most important family member, right? Riko tried to strike again, but Minori slapped her back. A sober Riko knelt before Minori, begging for forgiveness. He offered to do anything if Minori would tell him where Wataru was. Just then, Wataru finally returned. Riko quickly approached her son and, concerned, asked if Minori had instigated him. Even then, Wataru continued to defend Minori, pleading with his mother not to embarrass him. He claimed that running away from home was entirely his own idea. Wataru even confessed to his mother in person that he had fallen for Minori. Riko was nearly devastated upon hearing this, bewildered by her son's affections for such a woman. Minori, speaking of their previous visit to the barbershop, speculated that Riko hadn't told Yudai. Riko knew Yudai was greedy for money. If he knew Minori suspected him of infidelity, Yudai would have abandoned Riko without hesitation for Minori's wealth. But Riko continued to deceive herself, saying only those who aren't loved are the third party. Yudai will eventually marry her. Seeing Riko's expression, Minori decided not to dwell on her. At this point, Wataru said, as long as Mom breaks up with Yudai, he'll return to Mom. For Wataru had already realized that Yudai wasn't trustworthy. Riko was faced with a choice between Wataru and Yudai. A few days later, Riko arranged to meet Yudai. Yudai gently reassured Riko, saying that everything was settled and they could finally be together. However, Riko unexpectedly broke up. Yudai explained that he had divorced his wife solely for Riko and Wataru's sake. Riko also questioned her inner doubts about whether Yudai truly loved her. After their divorce, Riko reunited with Yudai and began an extramarital affair. She accepted funding from Yudai's mother to open a barbershop on the condition that they remain secret lovers. Riko thinking carefully, who is more important, herself or Minori? Every time Riko needed Yudai, he wasn't there. Was Yudai still in love with Minori because he still loved her? Riko was completely disappointed with Yudai and resolutely left. Yudai stepped forward to intervene, questioning Riko about the fate of her unborn child. Riko was eager to distance herself from Yudai. In her eyes, Yudai was an outsider, unworthy of interfering in her affairs. Abandoned by both women, Yudai was unkempt and drunkenly walking on the street. At that moment, a female colleague in the office who had always had a crush on Yudai approached him and whispered, "Don't worry too much about cheating. When you truly love someone, it's hard to control yourself." Yudai, surprised by someone's words, thought he was about to have another romantic encounter and excitedly approached. The female colleague cleverly dodged, then said, "Cheating isn't a big deal, but getting caught is another matter. Whether it's his wife or his mistress, Yudai shouldn't treat them like fools." A female colleague scolded Yudai, "I despise men who disrespect women the most. I came all this way just to tell him something. Go to hell, scumbag." At the company, Yudai was fired for having an extramarital affair, and his colleagues generally agreed. That evening, only his subordinate remained loyal to Yudai, going out to dinner with him. The subordinate pressed Yudai if he really married Minori for money. Yudai said he married someone he didn't like just for money. The subordinate was puzzled. Why would someone sacrifice their lifelong happiness for money? If Yudai didn't have feelings for his wife, they wouldn't have been together for 17 years. This sentence made Yudai realize that perhaps he had already been subtly falling in love with Minori. After returning home, he fantasized about Minori and his son. Yudai fell to the ground, awakened from his reverie. Realizing that everything had changed, Yudai could only lie on the ground and cry. A few days later, Minori returned home to find the house in disarray. She didn't bother to ask why Yudai had called her back, but simply asked why the divorce papers hadn't been signed yet. Yudai knelt down and begged Minori for forgiveness, hoping she would give him a chance to mend his ways. Minori, however, scoffed at him, jokingly asking if he was too lonely. Yudai sincerely apologized to Minori, admitting that their initial relationship was motivated by financial considerations, but that after years of marriage and companionship, Minori had become an indispensable part of his life. He humbly begged Minori for another chance to mend his ways. Although Minori was moved by his words, she didn't forget her most important goal, revenge against Yudai. To make Yudai realize his mistakes, Minori used Wataru to destroy his work, allowing him to experience firsthand the pain of betrayal by someone he trusted. And now, Yudai begging for mercy was exactly what Minori wanted. Only in this way could she find redemption. But for some reason, Minori felt pain at that moment. Because she had always sought Yudai's attention, hurting others was not her intention. Hearing this, Yudai felt that Minori still loved her and begged her to reconcile. Minori asked in disbelief, "Is this true this time?" Yudai promised to treat Minori sincerely in the future, but Minori said she couldn't feel it, and she felt both amused and embarrassed. After all, once trust between two people collapses, everything they say becomes a lie. Minori left her home and took off her long-worn wedding ring as she walked down the street. The deep ring marks on her finger seemed to remind her of the memories of the past, which were difficult to erase. She decided to move away with her son, Tsubasa. As they were about to board the bus, Wataru suddenly appeared, calling out to Minori and earnestly pleading with her not to leave. If she insisted, his own life would be completely devoid of hope and purpose. Minori apologized again to Wataru, confessing that she had used him many times for revenge. Wataru was unconcerned, knowing full well that Minori was innocent and that she had been the guiding force behind his growth. The announcement urged passengers to board the bus quickly, but Minori didn't respond to Wataru's offer and hurriedly turned away. Wataru pressed his concerns, but Minori simply urged him to live his own life, and the two parted ways. 7 years passed in the blink of an eye, and their son, Tsubasa, had grown into a big boy. Minori opened a cafe in the small town of Ryohara, nestled between the forest and the sea, intending to live a quiet life with Tsubasa for the rest of her life. Sarah came to congratulate her and asked if she should consider a new encounter. Minori gave a suggestive smile, and Sarah noticed something strange and asked what was going on. Divorced Mr. Taguchi often visited Minori's cafe, and the other parents noticed his interest in Minori and wanted to bring them together. But Minori felt she was past the age of pursuing love and worried that Tsubasa, now grown up, would mind. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this from Tsubasa after school, Tsubasa generously said she didn't mind, saying she just wanted her mother to be happy. One day, Minori went to pick Tsubasa up from school and unexpectedly ran into Wataru at a corner. Both couldn't believe the other was there. It turned out that Wataru had been teaching in Ryohara since September of this year, and coincidentally, he was Tsubasa's class teacher. At that moment, her son's cry of "Mom" brought Minori out of her thoughts. She didn't dare say another word to Wataru and hurried over to Tsubasa. Off to the side, Mr. Taguchi's daughter took the initiative to pull Tsubasa home, hoping to create more time for her father and Minori to spend time together. But Minori was clearly not paying attention to Taguchi, still reminiscing about her chance encounter with Wataru. Wataru, on the other side, was equally upset. His mother, Riko, had called, demanding when he would be home, her words brimming with control. Clearly, Wataru's life hadn't been easy these past few years. The voice of a little girl, coquettishly wanting to play with her brother, could be heard on the phone. It wasn't hard to guess that this was Riko and Yudai's child. Yudai, fired from his job for infidelity, now had to work for a lesser job. Seeing his colleague eating the lunchbox his wife had prepared, with photos of their children on his desk, he couldn't help but recall the warm family moments of the past, and a wave of sadness welled up in his heart. The next day, Wataru went to the cafe to find Minori. 7 years ago, thanks to Minori's encouragement, Wataru successfully entered the Faculty of Education at Keiho University. After graduation, he came to Suzawara to become a teacher. He was no longer the youthful young man he had been. When Minori met his intense gaze, she looked away in panic, jokingly saying, "She's already a 40-year-old woman. Wataru is still young, so you should date more and enjoy your youth." Wataru understood Minori's intentions and was about to confess his feelings to her when several parents and Mr. Taguchi walked into the cafe. Watching Minori and Mr. Taguchi's lively conversation, Wataru swallowed his words. The parents praised Wataru's handsome appearance and then asked with interest about his family background. The parents saw a photo of Wataru's lovely sister, Reika, on his phone and showed it to Minori. For Minori, Wataru's sister was like a thorn in her heart, a constant reminder of the painful past. Minori accidentally broke a teacup, and Wataru, worried about her injuries, lost his composure and momentarily forgot to be discreet. Mr. Taguchi brought a toolbox to bandage Minori's wound. Watching their intimate interactions, Wataru hesitated to speak. Even far away in Tokyo, Riko, hearing her daughter Reika miss her brother, was eager to learn about Wataru's situation online, so she searched online for Suzuhara Town. When she found the search results, she was horrified. Mr. Taguchi, taking advantage of the other parents' absence, asked Minori out on a date. Wataru's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected Minori to accept Taguchi's invitation. Wataru left silently. As night fell, a disgruntled Wataru returned to Minori's cafe. However, Minori politely requested Wataru not to visit again. This was because Wataru had publicly addressed her as Minori during the day, a term of endearment that could easily cause gossip in the small town. She hoped they would maintain their distance and remain merely teacher, student, and parent. Wataru, still unwilling to give up, followed her into the shop and tentatively asked if she was really going to date Taguchi. Minori bluntly stated that it was a private matter and none of his business, and asked him not to interfere. Wataru was about to speak when Tsubasa suddenly arrived and interrupted the conversation. Wataru hurriedly left, claiming to have forgotten something. On the day of the date, Minori and Taguchi arrived at a coffee shop. Taguchi confessed that he had been divorced from his ex-wife for 6 years, citing differences in their values. This time, he wanted to date Minori with the intention of getting married. Confronted with Taguchi's frankness, Minori stated that they were not a good match. Minori then confessed to Taguchi about her past, her ex-husband's infidelity and illegitimate child, and her revenge on him with a third party. Minori felt unworthy of Taguchi for being so cruel. Unexpectedly, Taguchi felt a pity for Minori after hearing this. Back home, Taguchi discussed Minori and Wataru's relationship. His instinct told him it wasn't a simple relationship between a student's parent and a teacher. Minori confessed that 7 years ago in Tokyo, she had been Wataru's cram school teacher. As they parted, Taguchi told Minori that her frankness had deepened his affection for her and promised that he would never hurt her if they were together. Back at the cafe, the gossipy parent inquired about their progress, while Wataru listened quietly. Minori said that although Taguchi had confessed his feelings, she was still considering it. Hearing this, Wataru finally breathed a sigh of relief. After leaving the cafe, Wataru wanted to chat with Minori, but Minori adamantly avoided him and headed back inside. Just then, Riko came out and greeted her son. Upon hearing Riko's voice, Minori's first reaction was to run away. She panicked and slammed the door shut, retreating back inside. Sure enough, Riko had already seen Minori. It turned out that while Riko was browsing the town of Suzuhara, she had come across Minori's cafe on social media. Riko believed Minori had been secretly contacting Wataru. Over the years, she had blamed Minori for all her misfortunes and decided to settle all grudges, old and new. Minori, in turn, realized that her peaceful life was about to be shattered. No matter how far she fled, Riko would always find her. Wataru was furious with his mother's sudden arrival and dragged her out of the cafe, demanding to know why she had come without warning. Riko angrily questioned her son's decision to become a teacher in Suzuhara because of Minori. Wataru explained that Minori had only opened the cafe 2 months prior, and he had been in Suzuhara 6 months prior, so their encounter was purely accidental. But Riko, regardless of whether it was coincidence or deliberate, simply wished her son would stop getting close to Minori. But Wataru, unwilling to be manipulated by his mother, explicitly demanded she stop interfering in his life and issued a stern warning: "If you harm Minori in any way, I will immediately sever our relationship." Wataru found Minori again, first apologizing for disturbing his mother again. Then Wataru recounted his situation over the past 7 years. To atone for his mother's sins, he had taken on the responsibility of a father, sharing household chores and childcare with her. Unexpectedly, his mother's dependence on him grew, even to the point of monitoring his every move. Unable to endure the suffocating possessiveness, Wataru fled to Suzuhara. It was not until his reunion with Minori that Wataru truly experienced the meaning of living his own life. Minori, though touched by the weight she held in Wataru's heart, hesitated to reciprocate. As she turned to leave, Wataru embraced her tightly, unable to conceal her heartfelt emotion, lost in the embrace. Wataru recalled that 7 years prior, during their cram school years, Minori had promised him a reward if he achieved his academic goals. Now, taking advantage of this unfulfilled promise, he invited Minori to go to the aquarium with him this weekend. Wataru handed over the ticket, and as Minori took it, a figure flashed past the window, witnessing the scene. Their identity and whether they would reveal their relationship remained a mystery. In Tokyo, Yudai returned home from get-off work. Facing a house strewn with household garbage, he greeted the bedroom, but received no response. For 7 years, Hiromi had abandoned a normal life, refusing to work or do housework, spending her days languishing in her room, unable even to hold a normal conversation. At this moment, Riko arrived. Yudai, mistaking her for a demand for child support, pleaded for a temporary reprieve. Riko seized the opportunity to offer a condition. If Yudai did her a favor, the child support could be discussed later. Riko then informed Yudai that Wataru and Minori lived in the same town and had an ambiguous relationship, urging him to break them up. Riko bluntly stated that Wataru was her son, and if Minori took him away, she would not let him go. On the day of the scheduled meeting, Minori dressed up and arrived at the bus stop, but instead of accepting Wataru's invitation, she rejected him outright. She hoped Wataru would find someone suitable and start a new relationship, then turned and left. Wataru refused to give up, proclaiming his unwavering love for Minori. A torrential downpour struck, forcing the two to take shelter in a shed. Seeing Wataru soaking wet, Minori tenderly took out a handkerchief to wipe his hair. This scene reminded Wataru of a bath at Minori's house 7 years prior, and the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Wataru then confessed that it was Minori who had transformed his previously poor empathy and taught him to be considerate of others. Wataru also mentioned that they both now carry the pain of being hurt by others and feeling guilty about it, and he hoped to help Minori overcome this torment. Minori was moved by this understanding of herself, tears welling up in her eyes, and they kissed passionately. However, her son, Tsubasa, suddenly called, worried that his mother had forgotten her umbrella. Minori suddenly sobered up, claiming it was just a spur-of-the-moment reaction, and hurried off. That evening, Taguchi came to the cafe and mentioned seeing Wataru and Minori hugging. It turned out to be him outside the window. Minori reluctantly explained her connection to Wataru's family to Taguchi, insisting, "I will never be with Wataru." But Taguchi had already seen through their mutual affection. Even though he knew there was no chance, he sincerely wished Minori happiness. At school, Tsubasa found Wataru and revealed that he had overheard his confession to his mother. Tsubasa pleaded with Wataru to stop and not cause his mother any more pain. A few days later, Minori received a threatening letter made from newspaper clippings. Minori was terrified when Taguchi called to say he had left something at the cafe and would come to retrieve it. Minori repeatedly speculated about the anonymous letter's author. Was it a parent who frequently visited the shop, her son Tsubasa, Taguchi's daughter, Wataru's mother, or Taguchi himself? She fell into a state of panic, perceiving the slightest movement as a threat. When Taguchi entered the shop, Minori, overcome with paranoia, collapsed to the floor. Taguchi picked up the threatening letter and instantly understood its purpose, promising, "I will never hurt Minori." During the standoff between the two, Yudai suddenly entered. Minori asked Taguchi to leave and faced Yudai alone. Meanwhile, Tsubasa, returning from school, ran into Wataru on the street and questioned him about his past with his mother, showing him the threatening letter he had secretly photographed. Wataru was stunned by this, and Tsubasa bluntly admitted, "Mom's condition has been poor since Mr. Wataru came." Wataru, overcome with guilt, realized the heavy burden his love had placed on Minori. Inside the cafe, Minori confronted Yudai with the threatening letter. Yudai, however, looked bewildered, claiming he wouldn't have come if Riko hadn't told Minori where he lived, and he denied writing the threatening letter. Minori was completely devastated upon learning that Yudai was still in contact with Riko, and she questioned his motives. Yudai guiltily replied, "I just wanted to see her and my son." Minori calmly replied that Tsubasa rarely mentioned him anymore, and that mother and son had already moved on. Yudai then asked if Minori was serious about being with Wataru. Yudai believed Wataru was still young and couldn't give Minori true happiness. Minori, drawn back to her thoughts, summoned Wataru. Wataru apologized for the threatening letter, speculating that it might have been his mother's doing. Minori then changed the subject, saying she had decided to leave town on her own and not alone. As soon as she finished speaking, Yudai stepped aside, promising to protect them. Wataru was stunned and heartbroken, unable to understand why Minori had forgiven Yudai. Minori responded by saying that her biological father had always been the best to Tsubasa. Wataru excitedly declared that he could protect Minori and Tsubasa and her son. In reality, Yudai's cooperation in the play was a way to dissuade Wataru. Minori hardened her heart and declared Wataru's admiration a nuisance. Wataru, remembering Tsubasa's words, left disheartened. Minori watched him retreat, tears welling up in her eyes, and the two of them finally had a bitter falling out. Later, Yudai quietly followed Tsubasa home from school, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Upon being noticed, Yudai knew better than to interrupt and left in tears. Taguchi returned to the cafe with even worse news than the threatening letter. Someone had posted an anonymous online post, spreading rumors that Minori seduced high school students and had a chaotic private life. This prompted online accusations, with some even declaring they would never visit her cafe again. Minori suspected Riko was responsible. Taguchi suggested calling the police, but Minori refused, fearing that Wataru would be implicated. Taguchi angrily retorted that Minori was still thinking about others. Deeply troubled, Minori called a number for help, but the identity of the person remains unknown. Even then, Wataru returned home to Tokyo and found the house in a state of disarray. His mother lamented dejectedly. For 7 years, she's been subjected to constant criticism for her infidelity, her business has suffered, and her daughter, Reika, has been ostracized by her classmates. Now, Minori wants to take her son away. Wataru interrupted, demanding to know if she had sent the threatening letter. Riko, puzzled, then produced a threatening letter she had received, identical to Minori's. Wataru was then convinced that her mother was not the sender. Seeing Wataru about to leave, Riko tried to stop her. Wataru, however, resolved not to live with his mother anymore. Realizing how he and his son were drifting apart, Riko fell to her knees and wept bitterly. On the way back, Wataru suspected Yudai, who knew his mother's work address and had a grudge against both his mother and Minori. Minori was isolated by the town residents due to online rumors. Taguchi's daughter, noticing Tsubasa's low mood, offered to comfort him. She explained that although she had been abandoned by her mother since childhood, she could not hate her. She urged Tsubasa to trust her parents and not believe online rumors. Tsubasa was deeply moved and told Minori after returning home. It didn't matter if his classmates ignored him, as long as his mother was happy. He promised to stay by her side forever. With her son's support, Minori's determination to find the truth grew stronger. At this point, the mysterious person she had previously sought help called back, saying they had concluded their investigation. After settling her son down, Minori decided to personally seek revenge on the sender. Back in Tokyo, Wataru found Yudai and directly accused him of sending the threatening letter. Yudai refused to argue, but Wataru insisted that he was the instigator. During the argument, Hiromi emerged from the bedroom, mistaking the letter for a threatening one from Yudai. She angrily slapped him and urged him to turn himself in, leading to a quarrel between mother and son. Minori arrived just in time and publicly pointed out that the threatening letter and the online rumors were the work of Yudai's mother. Hiromi feigned ignorance, prompting Minori to reveal that she had sought the help of her biological father, Tsukishiro Susumu, and discovered that all the posts had originated from her computer, with her fingerprints all over the threatening letter. After the truth was revealed, Hiromi dropped her pretense, confessing that she had been targeted by the scandal and had given up on herself for 7 years. One day, after hearing Riko mention Minori, she decided to ruin Minori's life. She was seeking revenge against Riko because she couldn't stand her comfortable life. Hiromi also attempted to shift the blame onto her son, blaming Yudai's lack of self-control for her situation. Minori pulled out her phone, claiming to have recorded her conversation as incriminating evidence. Yudai's mother, completely distraught, rushed towards Minori, knife in hand. Wataru immediately stepped in front of Minori, and blood splattered on the ground. Minori panicked, believing Wataru to be injured, only to see him looking up unharmed. It was Yudai, clutching the knife with both hands, who had saved them. At this point, Yudai finally came to his senses and urged his mother to stop, saying, "They caused this, and they are the ones who must atone." Hiromi, terrified of her son's betrayal, ran out. An emergency siren blared outside, and Tsukishiro Susumu got out of the car. Yudai's mother, still adamant, insisted that it was all Minori's fault and was eventually taken to the police station by bodyguards. Yudai promised to go with her, promising to look after her mother and not bother Minori again. Minori expressed her gratitude to Yudai for his repentance, wishing him a good life in the future. The two of them laughed and put aside their past grudges. After enduring this life-or-death ordeal, Minori and Wataru's relationship blossomed. Just as Wataru was about to confess his love, Riko called, claiming she was going to commit suicide, then hung up. Wataru and Minori rushed to the scene and sought a phone by the rooftop fence. They frantically searched for it. Riko suddenly appeared from behind, mocking her son for being so slow. Riko was just using suicide as an excuse to see Wataru. Wataru questioned her mother's intentions, but Riko recounted the past. She had fallen in love with Wataru's biological father, was abandoned after becoming pregnant, and later married Yudai to protect Wataru. Riko tearfully argued, didn't she deserve forgiveness? Wataru, accustomed to her cries, urged her mother to stop being so unreasonable. Riko watched Minori approach, expecting a confrontation. Minori suddenly approached, hugged her, and confessed that while she struggled to let go, she knew the cycle of revenge would never end. Minori felt that having once sought revenge against Yudai for her infidelity, she now felt guilty, knowing that Riko, like her, had hurt those close to her. Riko was moved by these words and shed tears of remorse. Wataru approached, hugged her mother, and urged her to live a good life. Riko, realizing her mistake, kept saying, "I'm sorry." After the Tokyo incident was resolved, Minori returned to her small town. The residents who had previously isolated her came to apologize, admitting they shouldn't have believed the online rumors. Taguchi again urged Minori, now that there are no obstacles between you and Wataru, you should bravely pursue your love. Only when she's happy will Tsubasa be happy. Inspired, Minori called Wataru over and confessed her desire to live openly and to bravely express her love. Wataru embraced her passionately, and the two repeatedly told each other, "I love you." Wataru explained that his career wasn't stable yet and asked Minori to wait for him for another year, believing he would be a man worthy of her. A year later, Minori visits her mother's grave and recounts the changes that have taken place over the past year. Tsubasa grows closer to Taguchi's daughter, Sarah achieves career success and decides to pursue independence, and Wataru realizes his dream by opening an open school in Tokyo. Meanwhile, Tsukishiro Shin also visits the grave, and his conversation with Minori grows closer. Other characters also find their endings. Yudai's mother remains unrepentant, requiring bodyguards to watch over her while she works as a cleaner. Riko lets go of the past, devoting herself to caring for her daughter and working diligently. Yudai works hard as a laborer, learning to get along well with others. Minori returns to the cafe to find Wataru already waiting there. The two exchange a tender gaze, and the story concludes. This concludes the series. Thank you for your support, and see you next time.